Welcome, everyone. We are worshiping together in person here at North Hills, and welcome also to those who are online. The wise man wrote in the book of Proverbs, "If a man finds a wife, it is a good thing." So look what I found. My name's Dennis Wallstrom, and been on staff here at North Hills Church for some time. I'm not all fancy and new like Pastor Angel, but I'm trying to keep up. And
I'm Julie Wheeler. I'm the found wife, so glad to join you.
So we are in the middle of a series that Pastor Tim started on forming relationships, and we're in the second section that has to do with the goal or the direction of a relationship. And there's a scripture from the prophet Amos where he says, "Do two walk hand in hand if they're not going the same place?" And that should be, we got that text? Having some trouble? Okay.
Your cell phone. Give it to.
Yeah, thanks.
Is that your work wife?
Okay. I'm going to own that one completely. I should remember by now. Don't have the cell phone in my pocket. All right. So, do two walk hand in hand if they aren't going to the same place? We want to talk today about how one become two and how two go the same direction to the same place. We title this talk, well, let me just show you where we are in the series. This is in the second one where we look at relationships as mission-driven, a sense of mission, which may seem a little bit strange, but we want to unpack that for you a little bit today, that there is that sense of mission in a relationship. And we've titled our talk today this, and see what you think. From me to we to thee, how God surprises us off the path we know. It's a journey, it's a path that we want to talk about. And here's the takeaway. I'll just give it to you, okay? God often brings two people together in surprising ways to create a new path of serving, giving, creating, and loving. And may I say, it's wonderful to be surprised. It's wonderful to discover. And it is awesome to walk the path. We want to invite you along. This, the scripture for our thoughts today is basically the entire Bible. So forgive me if I can't be brief. No, I will. Basically, the entire Bible, this is a theme, where you have people who learn things in their relationship with God, then they learn things in relationship to another important person, perhaps significantly, the one with whom you become one. And then third, that sense of participating in a goal and moving towards something greater than themselves. And so there are examples starting with Adam and Eve, Abraham and Sarah, Moses and Zipporah. I've just put down a lot of these examples here. And you can this afternoon look at some of these examples and notice how these are surprising couples.
Wonder why he put that one in there.
Hosea and Gomer.
Are you talking about me? What is this?
Well, you're the good one in this relationship.
Okay, all right. When I first started dating Dennis, he did not let me in. He did not trust me. I mean, really, he didn't just include me in things. So there came a point in our relationship, and I said, look, dude, if I'm staying, you got to let me in. And then, well, this is one thing I've learned. Whenever I point the finger at him, you have, three pointing back at you, right? So I had to look at how was I not letting him in, because I wanted that in my relationship, and anything I want, then I better start generating. So how did I start letting him in? And there was things I had to take care of on my end.
And we might think of it as our individual stories that we brought into the marriage. Julie had her own stories from growing up, and I had one of my powerful stories is that women will leave you. And that sense of lack of security, that I brought that in. That was all me. And that's why trusting and sharing was not instinctive for me.
And for me, it's so important for me to be able to be a helpmate. That's how I'm designed. I want to help, I want to serve, I want to be. He was like, I'll do it on my own. Well, but I want to help. Well, so I started, this really made him mad. I started saying, ask me to do something. No, ask me. But it's a game. We're playing a game, Dennis. Ask me to do something for you. Could you? And then he would come up with something. But this was like a grub. And if I can't help my husband, that's not the relationship I want to be in. That's how I'm designed. Now I can overhelp, so that's where he's good for me, because I'm not going to be overhelping.
So all that is to say that as the two became one, it had, especially midlife, it had lots of challenges and potential for growth. And I believe very strongly, Julie and I both do, in the oneness of marriage, and that there is something significant and beautiful and holy that happens in that oneness. But I think a lot of people think that is the destination. That to find that significant relationship, to find that significant love is the end point, and then I will be happy. And we want to suggest in this journey that there is a third stopping point, a dynamic and growing destination or station along the way that we want to share a bit about. So we can bring up the next slide. We're going to stay on this one for a while. And these are what we'll call three stations along the way. And we'll call this in the New Testament sense, the way. It's the path. It is not the eternal heavenly spa. Now, what in the world do I mean by that? That you arrive at a comfortable place, it is blissful, and that's where you end up. What if God brings us on a journey with Him that continues and extends on into eternity and through eternity? It's not exactly, when was the last time we were at Glen Ivy?
Not soon enough.
It's been too long. And it's nice. It's beautiful, right? A number of you have been to Glen Ivy?
It's the mud spa where you get muddy and then you're in hot mineral baths. Yeah? No?
It's very nice. But I don't want to live there.
Right. True.
And so what we're talking about today is the path, the way that has this continuous aspect to it. We can think of these three stops. The first, the personal work that each of us does, the personal integration, the me work, the singularity of life. And as I think most of us realize, we've got to do our own work to be ready for relationship and friendship with anybody. The second station would be the station of mutuality, of interpersonal formation. And I chose that word intentionally because it forms us, it shapes us, that mutual aspect of things. But the third stop is the one that we don't want to miss, and that is the union of purpose. How, let's say, a couple or people in a friendship or in a ministry, there's a union of purpose which, and forgive me, but transpersonal generativity. I had to sound like a psychologist, at least for a brief moment. And it's an important way of phrasing it, because by transpersonal, I mean rather than personal, rather than interpersonal, this is what goes beyond my ordinary human experience. This is what reaches out to God and where God is leading me, God's light. It leads me into the presence of God himself. It is transpersonal. And generativity is, again, another psychological term that has to do with maturing in life, where I'm actually generating, I'm bearing fruit in Christian terms. And so there is the me, there is the we. The thee is both Godward and outward toward others.
I think our path describes this pretty clearly. I was just saying to him when we were in our seat, us being up here today is a total thee. I mean, I would never have been able to do this without him. During COVID, I got my Master's of Divinity. That was not on my radar. And had I been married to a different person, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be following God's call. And so having Dennis in my life has, and he wasn't pushy. He wasn't saying, that's the way, do it. But I felt a call. Before I married Dennis, I had felt a call from God, which I ignored for 2 years. You know, Jonah running from God. And then I got thunked on the head, as Jonah did, and realized that this was the path for me. And Dennis just made it really simple. Remember that time we were on our patio?
Well, and this maybe illustrates the generativity, because we didn't plan it, we didn't expect it, we were both surprised by it. But Julie was at a place in her professional life where her work for the university was in transition, and there were some challenges that were facing you during that time. And we were sitting out on the patio talking about these things, like what's next, and the thought. And from our patio, we looked down into city of Pomona, and right there is Pomona Valley Hospital Medical Center. And it just kind of came up and developed.
No, you said,
okay,
what about there? Why don't you go there? I bet they have a chaplain's training program there. And I called, and there it was. And that training program got me into the ministry. But that wouldn't have come to me without him.
I've had friends who've been chaplains. Our Pastor Tim has worked in chaplaincy, and Julie's mom was a chaplain in.
Still didn't occur to me.
But that was one of those revealing moments where just looking down there at the hospital and thinking, I think they've got a chaplaincy program there. Mm-hmm. She checked it out, and she became one. And to our surprise, there were other things that began to develop. Like, okay, when I finish this chaplaincy program, what am I going to do? And you began to have dialogue with leaders in your denomination about the possibility of becoming licensed and ultimately becoming ordained. It took over a period of time. And Julie made the decision, we talked and prayed about it, and she made the decision to go to seminary. And so she went to Bethany Seminary in Indiana and did her Master of Divinity program there. She was very, very busy for those years.
So this is where, when we talk about, well, and I'll get to this when I conclude, but the me, we have to work on the me. We have to be living a full life, having our own goals, be really intentional about having this beautiful life. And then we becomes more beautiful. I know a lot of people who are like, I'm just waiting for the guy. And they're not doing anything in their life. They're not interesting, they're not passionate, they're just waiting to get married. And I think, okay, so you've got to really develop the me. And then the we comes together, and so I'm not losing myself in my marriage with Dennis, but I'm becoming more profoundly me in that marriage. And that's really healthy. And remember, marriage is the most important choice you'll make. That person you spend, he influences me moment by moment. And I've been in other marriages, and they have influenced me moment by moment, for good or for ill. So it's really important.
Well, and then let me give you a surprising moment that I experienced that I could not have anticipated. Because in my own practice of psychology, I love to bring together faith and spirituality as well as the science of psychology and so forth. And I've been in practice in Claremont now 14 years. But early on, we hadn't been married very long. And I was thinking, I'd like to add some things. I'd like to create more, but I'm in a small space. What can I do? And it was another one of those moments on the patio. And I look up at this blank space on the corner of our property, and I said, I bet I could build an office right there. Now this sounds strange, but let me tell you, that thought would not have occurred to me without her. Without the discussions, the dialogue, the process, the journeying together, the openness. Julie and I, those of you who know us pretty well, have somewhat different personalities. And, I remember years ago when I was studying how couples work and all the research and so forth, and there's a certain amount of research that talks about how couples, it's a good thing for them to be similar, and there actually is only a slight effect that direction. There's also the idea that couples need to complement each other. They're very different, but if they complement each other, that really works. And it's hard to have a broad rule for everything. But it seems to be that when a couple believes in things strongly and you're headed a certain direction, it meshes really well. And so in that moment, I had the inspiration, and she is my closest inspiration for whatever. And I began to think about it. I began to talk to people and talk to an architect and this was 5 years ago. It's been a long haul, but we have the framing is up and the roof is on, and it's actually going to be built there, a little retreat. And even the name of it, I kind of got from her. Because I said, it's got to reflect what this is, a kind of holistic retreat, and where it can be a thin space, as the Celtic people would talk about it, where God seems really close. And, I don't really speak a word of French. She speaks quite a few words in French. And I looked it up and I proposed a name, L'eau de l'esprit, water of the Spirit. And what do you think?
We like it.
And so that has become the name for this little retreat, this little spot that we dreamed of together. That's the path of thee. Not just a dreamy, heavenly spa, but a path that we walk together that reaches out. And Julie has been really inspirational to me in the way that you have become ignited inside for special challenges within the city of Pomona and the city of Laverne.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Moving to Pomona, I grew up in Laverne my whole life, which is some of you know Laverne, it's a kind of a upper middle class white community. And we moved to Pomona, and it's just been the best thing for my spirit walk. I get to see God's gritty world every day, like the homeless guys that are in my park, and how do I handle them? When I first moved to Pomona, I just wanted those guys gone. I wanted them out of there. It's my park. And, I've had to bring myself to, okay, there's a reason, there's a symptom, there's a whole world around homelessness. And what can I do? Instead of complaining about it or pointing my fingers or just trying to get them out of there, what can I do about it? So, we're very active. Dennis is on a committee looking at public banking. How can we free up monies so the community good can actually go to the local bank and that money is available for the community to use? I'm working with restorative justice in the community. So it's been really good for us. And we would, neither of us would have moved to Pomona without each other. So it's really strange it's a mystery how God works in our lives.
And it's interesting to me how the three dimensions, the three station stops work together, because the fact that Julie has such a heart for college students, for struggling people, for people who are forgotten and who are just having a difficult time, and the fact that she has that heart is very attracting to me. It totally works for her in her calling by God. It totally works for us in the bond that we feel together. So
when I met Dennis, I lived in a house that I rented rooms out to local college girls. So I was the seventh. We were 7 women living in this house. I love having people in my house. And Dennis loves having people in his house. So we live in a house that has lots of people living in our house. And many people could not tolerate that.
Occasionally I'll have one of my neighbors say, "How many people live in your house?" It's quite a few. What do we have now? 7 of us?
Yep.
And we absolutely love it. And we've had different people, students who've lived there for a time with us, and there is such a blessing. And this is part of Julie's gift to me, is that she takes any space and makes it fun and joyful. In our kitchen, she put up a sign. This kitchen is made for dancing. And that's the spirit, the atmosphere that's there.
So interesting, as he was speaking, talking about this new build, that it wouldn't have happened without me. I don't feel like I'm that influential with him. But here's a tiny story. The night before we got married, we had our families, his whole family and my whole family, come together to dinner at my house, at our house, 40 of us. And so here's Dennis's family up in this little room, and they're so quiet and well behaved.
Personality differences?
Yes, the whole family is sitting around the table, and someone's standing up with this phone, and he's like, and so nice, so nice. And then you look down in the other living room, and there's my family like yelling over each other and screaming and giving each other noogies. And I mean, it was like, and my friend, we were sitting right in the middle, and she's like, do you see Dennis's family? Do you see your family? Are you thinking this is going to work? But I think what it is I have enough boldness, I guess, and maybe wildness that gives him permission, and he has enough stability and staidness that it gives me enough foundation. I don't know, it just works. It works.
Yeah, I like it. And I got to tell you, when early on, when we were dating, we dated for a couple of years, and I went over to her house, and here are her two sons. And I just love her sons, Ben and Brandon. They are massive. So think Dwayne Johnson, The Rock. That's her oldest son.
6'4" and 6'5".
And they are giants. And they love each other, and they horseplay. And so I'm here over at her house, and they are wrestling and holding each other and slamming into the door jamb. The house is shuddering.
They're adults. And they're still doing that.
And I'm thinking, what is this? Am I up for this? Because I felt really puny by comparison. But that exuberance, that expressiveness, I mean, it's great medicine for me and my little reserved Scandinavian self. So, from me to we to thee.
Should I bring it home, Dennis?
Bring it home.
So marriage is gloriously hard. It may be the hardest thing one attempts in life, although nothing can mature your character as marriage can. But what is the purpose of marriage? Most of us in our current day, we're thinking, I'm going to find my soulmate. My twin flame. We're going to live happily ever after. But what would God say the purpose of marriage is? In Genesis, God sees that it wasn't good for us to be alone. So companionship is super important and a great benefit of marriage. A healthy marriage should be a refuge and a comfort from the world. Procreation, of course, children are a blessing, even if they're big and boisterous. God wants them raised in loving homes. In the Orthodox Church, matrimony is seen as a sacrament. So this is more than a divine sanction or a divine blessing. It's a sacrament. And what a sacrament implies is transformation and redemption. Marriage is God's most common, everyday tool for pruning and shaping the world for more of God's glory. Pruning and shaping, you say, that doesn't sound like living happily ever after. Perhaps the first order of business in marriage is to subordinate our individualism. What? I gotta be me? Well, yes, but in order to truly participate in a marriage, me must become we. This is the same thing you have to do in your relationship with God. You give God your whole life and say, God, we're a team. What are we going to do? And then you keep taking it back, right? This means you have to have your rugged American individualism take second or third or fourth place while you work at fully expressing your personhood within that partnership. Marriage is designed to civilize you and to destroy you. But that sounds like total annihilation. Well, you still get to be you, but in a grander and broader sense. What if your marriage was not just about you and not just for you? What if your marriage was to create the best rendition of you and your partner for God's purpose and mission to be brought to fruition for the world? My second marriage was the hardest 6 years I had ever had in my life. I kept saying yes to the painful lessons. I grew exponentially in that marriage. I learned to love the unlovable. I learned to be an unstoppable, loving wife in the face of an uncaring husband. That was the best marriage for Julie Wheeler, the human. Actually, it was the worst marriage for Julie Wheeler, the human, but the best marriage for Julie Wheeler, the God seeker. Because in that marriage, I had nothing to hold on to. I was so devastated that I had to reach for God. And I came back. That's where I came back to God, in that marriage. The you that is destroyed is the smaller self, your younger, your immature self. It cannot stand marriage because it can't stand not getting its own way. Thinks giving more than 50% is just not fair. It's just not fair. It cannot fathom the idea of self-denial and suffering. But if you let the lessons shape you, your self-centeredness will die a painful death, but the person who emerges is one of strength, duty, and generosity of spirit. They are capable of love, forgiveness, and intimacy. Perhaps the ultimate purpose of marriage is to reflect God's nature of love, sacrifice, and creativity in myself, for my spouse, and ultimately for the world. So here's to moving from me to we, to thee.
So our talk and our walk. Ready to take this on? So sometime this week, have this talk with the question, are we aware of God bringing us together for a purpose? Ask that important person, are we together for a person? What is the path that He's laid out for us? And talk about it and explore it. And then, as our walk, try out together a moment of venturing into generosity, helpfulness, sacrifice, and love. What would that be if we really moved together toward Thee and toward Thee?